Hello and welcome to Tales from the Unknown. My name is Zach, and tonight I invite you to join me as we play Whispers in the Wall, a game that asks the question, what would happen if walls could talk, and what dark secrets would they tell? So, without any more delay, let us begin. A quick note up top, Whispers in the Wall is absolutely a horror game, and we may delve into some horrific subject matter. And well, I right now don't know what that could be because the deck of cards is going to lead us down a pathway. Future me does absolutely know where this is going to go, so I'm going to put content warnings down in the description down below just to make sure that if you want to watch along, but you also don't want to get hit with something that is going to scar you, you can check that out before we begin. With that being said, let's get into setup. The setup for this game is incredibly easy. All we need is a deck of cards, the game itself, either the physical or digital version, and a place to write down our thoughts. I just have a blank journal and a pen. After we have gathered everything together, we are going to take our deck of cards, remove the jokers and spades, shuffle them together. That side deck is going to be called the Hollows deck, and pretty much whenever we pull a spade or a joker, it means something dark and sinister is going to happen in the story, or something dark and sinister is lurking about. When we pull cards from the Hollows deck, it is going to be bad news. We are then going to take the rest of the card deck, the diamonds, the clubs, and the hearts. We're going to shuffle that together, and that is called the Secrets deck. Those cards, when we pull them, are going to reveal more about the mystery, and it is also going to reveal more about the location. After that, we are going to pull 3 cards from the Hollows deck. Remember the spades and the jokers, the scary deck, and we're going to put those cards face down. And then we are going to pull 6 cards from the Secrets deck. Once we have those 9 cards, we're going to shuffle them together, and that right there is the Whispers deck. These 9 cards right here are going to help us tell the story because they are going to be the 9 prompts that we run into. It is important to note, in Whispers in the Wall, there is no set mystery. There is no set investigator. Everything we learn and find is going to help form what the mystery is and who our investigator is. We are pretty much just going into this game with no idea, and we are going to let the cards guide us. With that being said, let us draw our first card. So the first card I pulled was a 9 of Hearts, and what that tells us is our current location, or our investigator's current location. According to the book, a 9 means our investigator finds themselves in an old opera house, that hasn't seen lively music or really any life in years, a place in which vines overgrow the seats. Maybe there are holes in the roof kind of just letting stray beams of light kind of illuminate the area. And the game asks us a simple question, or 2 questions. What is the ghost's name that resides here according to legend? And something was left on the stage. What is it? Now, in my mind, with this prompt, we still don't know who our investigator is, but I kind of picture them like walking from the back of the opera house down like the center path, seats in both directions, old, torn, most of them probably taken, and we see like very thin beams of light kind of illuminating the stage up ahead. I kind of like the idea of this opera house kind of being haunted by this baritone voice kind of echoing throughout. You can almost faintly hear it on the wind, and I think it would be perfect if there was just a single microphone lit by some natural light coming through the roof, and the ghost of this place was the lone singer. Just something simple. We can always build on this story depending where the cards take us, but right now we have our investigator. They're in this old opera house, microphone center stage, natural light illuminating it, with the sound of opera on the wind. So with that card being pulled, we put it in discard, and then we pull our next card. So the next card that we pulled was the Queen of Spades, and just a quick reminder, this is not going to go well for our investigator. Spades and jokers are cards from the Hollows deck, meaning something impactful is about to happen. And what the game says when we pull a Queen of Spades is the whole of the room begins to fold upon you, closing in tighter. So our investigator, who is currently walking down the opera, hearing this, faint, ghostly opera music, this singing, suddenly the opera begins to crash down on them. The furnishings folding flat like a paper diorama until you're closed in tight. So, investigator, completely closed and tight. And we also can discuss here if these visions our investigator is having, are they real or not? Or does our investigator have like supernatural powers in which this is the building talking to them? That's kind of like the route I'm going with this, is that like this is a vision our investigator is seeing while in this place. The darkness is deep and confining. You hear footsteps above, muffled voices of mourners. Dry dirt scatters on top of the coffin. The game asks, as you look around, you find a memento someone quietly placed before the lid was sealed. Describe the memento left to the rightful owner of the coffin. And I think at this point, I don't think our investigator is working to solve a crime. I think maybe our investigator has some type of connection to this ghost. And maybe the coffin that they find themselves in, this vision that probably feels real, they probably are suffocating. And the terrifying thought of being stuck underground, hearing people crying up above. And I still think there's a faint sound of opera. I think what they find is a playbill in which the person on the front, their face is fading and so is their name. Because I'm starting to think like maybe 2 cards in, our investigator, like I said, is connected to this ghost and is trying to figure out what happened to them. Because maybe they were a famous singer before something tragic happened. And our investigator is just trying to connect the pieces. So with that being said, our investigator now stuck in this vision, hopefully breaking out soon, we pull the next card. The next card we pull is the Queen of Diamonds. And what diamonds represent in Whispers in the Wall are the floors. So something with the floor is going to talk to us. But right now, our investigator is still in the coffin. So we need to figure out how they're going to get out of that because they're stuck in that vision right now. So let's read what the book is telling us, what the game is telling us here. So a Queen of Diamonds says, the floor weeps. Droplets of water gather, bead, and fall skyward. That's pretty great imagery. You can smell their salt. The floor reddens like your own eyes during painful, racking sobs. You pat the floor in comfort, lay down on it, and stare upwards at the tears. They glisten to a low-fidelity scene. Describe the still-life moment the floor has shed tears for that provided it so much grief. So I think first of all, like I said, our investigator is within the coffin, and I'm kind of okay with leaving the investigator nameless right now until we really figure out what is going on here. I think they are currently pounding on the coffin lid, and after a very forceful swing, the coffin lid rips open and they find themselves in maybe a dressing room that is currently filling with water, the sound of crying, salty tears kind of floating upwards, and a very strange and ethereal scene. I think taken back by this, our investigator stands up, falls out of the coffin in a way, and lands in a chair and looks up, and on the ceiling we see maybe this large painting of the singer, once again, the ghost, standing on top of the opera house, their face obscured, still blurred, their memory slowly fading away, because the investigator's trying to figure out what happened here. And I think around the opera house, we see a lot of people cheering and, glad and just happy that the opera singer is singing. And I think this tale of ours is becoming one of a singer who was on the top of the world, who was bringing joy to this town, which I think this opera house is now way older than we thought it was. And I think something's going to happen here. I think for some reason, this opera singer is going to lose their fame, is going to lose the support of the people and be left alone. Why and how? Not sure yet, but I think that is where we're at. Our investigator sitting back in a chair, watching the floor cry upwards at this giant mural of a at prime opera singer bringing joy to this town. With that being said, we draw the next card. So the next card we pull is the Ten of Spades, which once again, this is the Hollows, meaning something traumatic is going to happen to our investigator, which, rough time so far. Walked into an opera house, got stuck in a coffin, broke out, the floor was crying. What a Ten of Spades says in the book is looking in a mirror, which is perfect. Our character, our investigator, is still sitting in the dressing room, and maybe they look over at the mirror. You see a foreboding forest, and then movement. A limb shoots out from the mirror, scarcely missing your head, and the forest begins to consume and take over until you stand squarely in the oppressive weight of the boughs above. Among the depression, a single perfectly fall orange leaf glides down to your feet. Delicately inscribed on it is a memory of a more pastoral time right before the calamity. Describe the memory. Okay. So this is what I'm thinking. I think the limb that goes flying past our investigator right here is maybe one of a soldier's. Tell you why I think that in a second. Goes flying past our investigator. They dodge out of the way. When they look up, they find themselves in this forest, and they see this leaf. I think on this leaf, they begin reading of this memory of this opera singer walking through this large forest around the town. We're going to say this is a fictional world. And I think it is a memory of a time before war. I think maybe that is where this story is going, and that is why that's the knight's arm going. Maybe this opera house used to be filled with joy and love because it was in peace. And where this is going, where this tragedy is going, because it says calamity, is that war broke out. Something happened, which led to hard times within this community. And I think that is what is on this leaf. This memory of the opera singer, this ghost walking through the forest one fall afternoon, and just remembering the peace and quiet there was before peace and quiet was no more. Yeah, I like where this is going. Let's pull the next card. So the next card we pull is a Two of Diamonds. So once again, something dealing with the floors. What the game says for a 2 is air vents seep and pulse a pungent air into the room. It is intoxicating and then suffocating with how overpowering the scent is. It permeates your entire being and pushes all other air from your lungs. Just as you run to open a window to pull in some sweet, fresh oxygen, the pressure subsides and you can breathe once more. The question is, what smell has the floor shown you? You peer into the vent and something is at the bottom. What do you see? I think right now, our character finds themselves in the dressing room again, our investigator. And I think maybe right now, my mind's kind of going that our investigator, maybe they are like a descendant of the opera singer from maybe a time after the war, or maybe still during the war, way down the line. And I think when they find themselves no longer in the forest, they find themselves in the dressing room, looking in the mirror, the room no longer crying, and the vents start releasing the smell of like perfume and alcohol. Maybe when the opera house was filled with joy and partying, and this like what starts out to be this really sweet smell, this really intoxicating smell, like the game says, becomes overwhelming. They run for the window. Maybe we see a little bit outside the window right now, maybe our investigator does, and we do see like a town that has been changed by war, maybe, and it still hasn't recovered. And by the time that they get air back in, the scent goes away. They look down, and I think in a very disgusting turn, what they see at the bottom of this vent for a quick few moments before it disappears, because it is a vision, I think is a pile of corpses of commoners and those who would go and watch the opera. So like people in very fancy dress, and I think they're riding away there and then they disappear, which is not a great sight to see if you're the investigator. And I think that right there is what is going on. So we're putting together a story right now. We have our investigator, who is a descendant of this opera singer. We have the opera singer who's tragically came to an end, possibly due to this war. This is now becoming more of a tragedy about this town than maybe the sole ghost, but we have something to lean on. We are about halfway through these cards right now, a little bit over halfway, and let's keep going. I'm excited to see where this story goes. So, the next card we pull is a 7 of clubs. Clubs are cards dedicated to the overhead, so like the ceiling, the roof, you know, things of that nature. A 7 of clubs reads, a great eye fully formed with lid, lashes, and brow opens above you, staring down at you. It runs through a series of emotions, ending with a large tear forming and dropping, staining the floor. What were the series of emotions the eye portrayed? Describe the eye color, shape, iris, lashes, and brow, and did the tear leave a distinct pattern on the floor? What was it? So I think at this point, our investigator has left the dressing room and maybe is going backstage, and just as they get to the stage where the lone microphone stands, where maybe the sound of the singer is most prominent, they look up at this giant eye staring down at the microphone and looking over at our investigator. The emotions the eye portray, I think, a very open eye at first, watching, waiting to see what will happen. They're at the opera after all, and if this is a story about a town that goes from peace to war, they see hope, promise. And then I think the eye, which is, we'll say brown eyes, dark lashes, we'll say begins to get a little bit more bloodshot as the excitement, the hope from it begins to turn to caution, maybe confusion into sadness, sadness into terror as the eye becomes more bloodshot, as it becomes alert, as it begins to look more around at the singer, at our investigator, and then, once again, to sadness. I think this eye represents what happened here, what happened to this town, this war, this invading force. Things were not well. A community that had hope loses it. And I think as the water drops, it drops onto that natural light, spotlighting the microphone. And I think it splashes in the form, a human form of the opera singer, left standing just behind the microphone. I think the investigator right now just kind of stands and watches and is putting together what is going on here. But they're on the stage right now, and things are heating up. So let's see what happens next. So the next card we pull is a 10 of hearts. What hearts are in Whispers in the Wall are the walls themselves, or, you know, things resembling walls. What the game says with a 10 of hearts is you look into a mirror, tarnished and cloudy but still intact. Behind you are the remnants of a gruesome scene, the empty, shattered setting of a languid, horrific act. After a moment, the mirror cracks, then shatters, and its pieces fall to the floor. The scene was difficult to make out in the dirty mirror, and turning around shows nothing. Describe the fleeting images you can make out. So right now, our investigator is currently on the stage. Microphone in the center, natural lighting, water stain of the lone singer, the ghost of this place. Faint opera playing. I think we haven't really defined what is on the stage with the opera singer. I think maybe the backdrop and the background of this stage is a recreation of the town center for the town in which the opera house is in. And obviously, through age, it has kind of rotted away. We see maybe a large clock tower, a church, in a very theatrical sense. Like it is a theater production. And I think as our investigator is walking past this backdrop of this town, they look and get a reflection in one of the mirrors, or not one of the mirrors, one of the windows that acts like a mirror. And I think what they see there is the town war-torn. They see bodies hanging in the town center. They see buildings on fire, the townspeople running and screaming for help. And I think obviously this makes our investigator take a couple steps back, seeing these very real images. And as they do, they run into some of the props on the stage, which creates this domino effect of the backgrounds falling and shattering and just creating what is like a replica of the town destroyed and that memory no longer there, leaving the backdrop gone and our investigator still standing on the stage, opera music behind them, the town in rubble in front of them. And whew, this story is getting sad. Whispers on the Wall is such a great game at just kind of like letting things happen, letting scenes happen, and just kind of following that thread, even if it is devastating and a sad story. And that's kind of where we're at. We have 2 more cards to pull. One still hollowed card in our deck, meaning we are still going to reveal more, but we are getting towards the end of the story. So, let us pull the second to last card. So, the second to last card that we pull is the 8 of Hearts. Now, we're staying in wall territory, and what this card says is a wall hook rattles loose and speeds around the room. You dodge and weave, but it was only a matter of time before it slams into your head, knocking you unconscious. When you awake, you've been sealed in a small dark space. In what matter were you sealed into space, into this space, and how do you escape? We're going to take that and abstract it a bit, because I really like this prompt and where it is taking us. But right now, with the second to last card, I kind of want to keep our character on the center stage. And I think instead of it being a literal small dark space, I think as our investigator wakes up, they wake up confined in a like old... No, actually, reverse that. Where they wake up is not their own body, not their own mind. They wake up in a small and dark space, but they find themselves stuck in a point of view that is not their own, a place that is unfamiliar, a place that they cannot control, and they find themselves from the point of view of the lone opera singer, looking out, singing to the audience that is no longer there, the sounds of explosion and just chaos and, war being waged around him as he belts out his last really notes. How do you escape? I don't know that yet. I think I kind of want to use this last card to see how we wrap this up, and that maybe will help us figure out how our investigator escapes. The last card we pull is a Jack of Spades. Now, because this is the last card, it is not going to be a hollowed card. Instead, we are going to use a separate table that is going to help lead us to the ending. How the ending works is it will give us a prompt just like before, but it will also tell us to put things together to kind of finish the story and to create something satisfying. So, the Jack card for the ending states this: laughter erupts from the walls, the kind only felt when a great stress is lifted and the adrenaline can finally leave the system. And as it always is with this laughter, it turns into sobs. The tears flow down the walls and begin to fill the room. You try the door, but it is still locked. Look over your notes and come to a conclusion about what happened and why. Explain it to the room, then attempt to comfort its crying before the water gets too high. Does the crying stop? Are you released? So I think where we ended, where our investigator is, kind of trapped in the POV of this ghostly singer, and because of the backdrops, I think as this singer is singing to emptiness, as to this war-torn ambience around them, I think the silence becomes laughs. The sounds of explosion becomes laughter and joy, just as we experienced before. I think looking over the notes, I think we've kind of came up with what happened here, is this singer lived in a peaceful town in which he brought joy to the townspeople, a place where he could practice his arts and bring stories and love and life to the world. But the world isn't fair sometimes. And despite his best trying of keeping the townsfolk happy with his stories and joy, war came. And with war, there was no more peace. There was no more quiet, dignified nights. There was no more music. And as the explosions and the ambience of war turns to laughter, that laughter begins to fall away and turns to sobs, just like the joy turned to stress, song into quietness. And as the opera house weeps for what it once had, we find our investigator fighting to break out of their ancestors' POV. They fight to remember what once was. And I think for the first time, maybe the investigator, being a descendant of the opera singer, sings in this empty opera house. And the sobs stop. And music once again fills this hall, despite it being centuries, years, a very long time since joy was once found in this place. And I think that stops the tears. That stops our investigator from drowning. And the last thing we see in this story is our investigator walking down the rows, a place that once had music and joy, now destroyed. And they leave. What they got out of that story, I don't know. I think this experience was grander than just the investigator, and it was something else. And that is Whispers in the Wall by Pandian Games, a game that I absolutely love, and I hope for those of you who have stuck around and listened and watched the entire thing, is a game that you also want to try out. Pandian Games makes awesome games. If you would like to go pick up Whispers in the Wall for yourself, you can get the digital version over on their itch.io page, or you can even get their a physical copy over on Pandian Games website. And yeah, what a game. Tabletop games are beautiful, especially solo games. They can take you to places and emotions that you weren't quite planning on going, and I very much love that about them. And with the end of our story, I would just like to thank you for watching or listening, and as always, be excellent to each other.